Hey everyone, it's 10 types, and rotation is right around the corner, and that means the decks are going to be changing, they're going to be adding and removing cards. Some decks are going to be much worse, some will be much better, and some will be not playable at all. And then, of course, there are brand new decks as well. So today I'm going to be taking a look at all the, I think it's like 15 or so decks in Standard. The most played decks will be going, I guess, in order of most played from Play Limitless. And so I'm going to be recommending the decks that I think are the best fit for you post rotation. If you have a specific deck you like, then this will give you an idea of what to play. Even if the deck is surviving rotation, there might be a better option potentially. And on top of that, there are also obviously decks that are completely rotating. These are what are most important for this. And there's just a lot of decks to talk about as well. There are some that are, as I said, completely new. So tell me down below though what deck you're playing, especially if it's one that's not on this list. If it's like a single prizer, there are a few single prize decks, but they're not perfect fits for everything, as we'll get into. But anyways, the first deck we have here is Dragapult EX. I've tried to have 3 recommendations for every deck, and I've talked about all these decks on my channel before as well. And we'll continue to, as well as we get a little closer to rotation. Again, it's only like a week and a half away or something like that. But anyways, you have Dragapult EX, and Dragapult EX is, probably the best deck pre-rotation and almost certainly the best deck post-rotation. So probably just stick with Dragapult. However, you could play Charizard EX that has some similarities. I guess. I mean, they're both stage 2s, and they're hitting like mid-range damage to the active. The Charizard can get up to that upper range, and obviously you don't do the bench damage, which is a big part of Dragapult. And then there is also Mamoswine EX. Mamoswine EX is much weaker. The decks I'm recommending aren't necessarily of the same power level. So yeah, Mamoswine's not as good as Dragapult. Charizard's not as good as Dragapult either, but it's close. But Mamoswine, you have a Pokemon as a stage 2. You do need multiple energies. You don't have that with Charizard. Well, you do need multiple energies on Charizard, but you pay essentially for free. Mamoswine, you have this issue of powering up your Pokemon. I don't really think that's a good thing. Like, it makes it worse, but it is something more similar. And then you also have a bunch of Pokemon in play that are using abilities every turn, right? Like Drake-Lope. And Drake-Lope is a pretty defining factor, I think, of the Dragapult attack. You have Mamoswine EX. They're not super similar abilities, but you are using a bunch of abilities that are of like moderate power on your Pokemon. But realistically, just stick with Dragapult. It's very good and will stay very good. Next deck is Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX is not rotating, so you could just play Gardevoir EX post rotation. It's okay. It's definitely getting weaker, but it's, again, not unplayable. Gardevoir EX itself is staying in the game, and the attackers are. But, of course, Kirlia, with the ability Refinement, discard 1, draw 2, is rotating. So the deck that has the same, or the Pokemon that has the same ability is Enzoric EX, which is really its own deck, and that deck is pretty different from Gardevoir EX. In like attacking and like energy stuff, but you have the same ability, right? So that is a place that you could find familiarity with. And then there is also Dragapult. Honestly, I think that's something that I expect to see Gardevoir players moving towards. Dragapult's, strong, certainly much stronger than Dragapult post rotation, and it's also a stage 2 deck, except it's a stage 2 deck that isn't really as like rare candy focused as something like Charizard. So you have, instead of Kirlia, you have Drake-Lope. They're kind of similar. You're not like, discarding, and the attacking is like pretty different. But the engine stuff and the feel of the deck is somewhat similar. Definitely not a bad option, and probably my top recommendation are stick with Gardevoir. Either of those are fine. Of course, you could try out anything. Then the next deck is Lugia. This is the first deck that's fully rotating, and this was the hardest one for me to figure out the best comparison. I will mention Chien-Pao, as Chien-Pao, or Baxcalibur, I guess, is a Pokemon kind of like Archeops. I have my list, and I only have 2 for this one. This is not one of them. I would not recommend playing Chien-Pao Baxcalibur. It's pretty bad post-rotation, like worse than Mamoswine. Because you're losing Irida, that's a pretty big reason, and some other stuff. And so you don't really have something like this. Obviously, the restore power is really unique, and the accelerating special energy is also pretty unique. But the 2 best comparisons I have, the best one, I guess, is Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX, you have a stage 2 that accelerates lots of energy. Your attackers are a variety of Pokemon that aren't like true standout Pokemon. Like, Lugia V-Star, you have Chichinos is stage 1, right? But then you have like Blood Ursaluna EX, Radiant Charizard, you have Weird Derby, you have Iron Hands EX, Lugia V-Star itself as well, Regigigas. Again, these are like solid single, like, different attackers. Some are single prizers, but you're not looking at these attackers that are insane unless they have a lot of energy, kind of like Drifloon or stuff. I don't know. It's not a perfect comparison. This is, again, definitely the deck that is has the worst comparison post rotation. And actually, this was the deck that I was considering not doing this video for a little while because I couldn't find a great one, but I wanted to make it, and that's a solid option, an okay option. Then there's Ionos, the Ionos deck. This one you have a lot of energy acceleration, kind of like Archeops, and you have, yeah, I don't know. It's okay. It's an okay comparison. Your when Pokemon has the same HP, you have again like a gaggle of more mediocre attackers. Though you do have Raging Bolt, and Raging Bolt's probably going to feel pretty different if you're playing that build. But anyways, Lugia definitely the one that I have that I couldn't think of a good comparison for. Actually, tell me down below in the comments if you have anything really good. That'd be really helpful. I still don't really play Lugia. It's definitely a deck that I've personally not enjoyed, so so I don't have as good insight into this one. Next up, though, we have Raging Bolt. There are two different builds of Raging Bolt. These are actually the only decks I have listed. It's very good post rotation. So if you play Raging Bolt now, there's not really a reason to switch off of it. I will give a bit of a warning. The deck is post rotation more like focused on Noctowl and therefore slower, not necessarily going for turn one knockouts all the time, which might be pretty jarring. And I don't think there's really a deck that is going to pick up the slack in that area. There's like the Terrabox deck, but there's just a basic deck, but it's not that similar. I'm still using Kill Masoga Pontiacs, but and then you have the same build essentially, or a similar deck. You do have Knockdown instead of like Radiant Ninja Pokestop, but Raging Bolt EX, Teal Pond EX, Professor Saw's Vitality. Then there is the other deck, the Ionos deck, which is a separate build of Raging Bolt. It's not played that much. It's not super strong. But it is a card or it's a deck build. People are playing with the Ethan's Ho-Oh EX, which isn't even out. They're going to be out post rotation. It'll be a little later, but here, yeah, this is one, again, it's pretty hard to find, but you have the Iono stuff. It's a bit of a different feel. It might be enjoyable. It's kind of cool. But yeah, probably stick with Raging Bolt EX. Then we have Miraidon EX. Miraidon EX is a deck that's taking a really big hit post rotation. Because it's losing like some of the attackers it has, and honestly, I don't think it's super good right now. I think it's okay, but you're losing the Pokemon V and Force Heal Stone, which is a pretty big loss. You can kind of play builds with there are some like Lightning Box decks more built around Pikachu EX. Oh, I'm probably not gonna be able to find it, am I? Oh no, here it is. This is like it's hardly similar, but this is the most directly similar deck. It's not as strong, and you'll definitely find it probably pretty underwhelming. So the decks that I have, first of all, I have a Raging Bolt, a high-powered basic built deck, basic main attacker. I was gonna say basic focused. You're only attacking with basics. You do have like Noctowl in there, but I think it's a somewhat similar feel as like a pretty turbo deck. Then you have Terrabox as well. Terrabox is a basic box deck. Obviously, it's a box deck. It's in the name. Box is a toolbox deck, if you didn't know, with like different attacking options, like Miraidon has. Right, you have the Iron Hands EX, the Miraidon EX, Raikou V, and you could attack with something else as well. But overall, the deck is you have some different attacking options. You have more, I think, with the Terrabox deck, which it can be really focused on Teal'c Ogerpon EX and maybe other Ogerpons and the Lily's Clefairy EX, or it could be more branched out into like stuff with Trapgos EX, Pikachu EX, and probably some other Pokemon that I'm forgetting. You of course have like Mew EX, and you could have Blood Luna EX, the more general technical Pokemon. But anyways, Miraidon EX is, I'd recommend one of those two. There's also a Future Box if you really want to use Electric Generator. It's not amazing, but it's played some post rotation. It's okay. You could play it now in standard, and it's not really a standout deck, and it's not like it's really getting much better, but it's okay. So if you want to play with that, then you can do that. But as I said, the top recommendation is going to be Raging Bolt. Not super interesting, maybe, but yeah, it's a good deck with some similarities. Charizard DX, played Charizard DX still. That it's losing some pieces. I mean, the stuff we mentioned with that's not the deck I want to click on. With Rhydon or like Forest Seal Stone, Rotom V, Lumineon V, these types of cards, you're losing those, and it's a decent loss. But you can still play the main Pokemon in the deck, so that's fine. And Charizard's fine post rotation. You can play Dragapult, it's another stage 2 deck. I mean, you can look here and we see Charizard Dragapult hybrid decks, right? So you could do that as well. And there are different builds of Charizard as well, with like more Dusknoir focused or Pidgeot focused or like Bidoof focused or something. And then you can also play Mamoswine. I talked about Mamoswine some earlier. You got that stage 2 solid damage, high HP, plays Pidgeot EX. It's not like that different. I mean, it's a little different. It's weaker. I'd say that's the biggest difference, but you do have similarities in play style some, so that's not a terrible comparison there. Then you have Ceruledge EX. Ceruledge EX, I do have 3 here. The one is Ceruledge EX. This is probably what I'd recommend. Ceruledge EX is losing a few important cards. If you're playing Palkia, you're losing that, but Radiant Greninja, Pokestop as well are pretty big losses. But I think the deck's okay. I think it's more than okay. I think it's decent. It's like kind of good. It's not as good as the next deck we're going to talk about. I'll talk about them together. Gholdengo and Ceruledge are pretty similar in my mind. I often group them together. Gholdengo is getting a bunch of cool stuff post rotation. Ceruledge is not really. So Ceruledge, you're looking at it's fine. Playing with Rephiroom a lot apparently, and we got stuff. Nothing really crazy to say about this deck. Again, kind of similar to Gholdengo. You could play the other one if you play one of those. And then there is also Archaludon EX, which I feel like they're kind of similar. They were shockingly similar when I played with them. I played with them together because from the same set. They're both stage 1s. They're pretty self-sufficient. You're like using resources to get energy in the discard, and you obviously need your stage 1 and some Pokemon, but you're not pulling off these like crazy combos. So I think there are some similarities there. Archaludon EX we'll talk about it some, but it's pretty interesting post rotation. I think you should just probably stick with Ceruledge or play Gholdengo though if you are playing Ceruledge now. And then we have Gholdengo EX. Gholdengo EX, again, play Gholdengo EX probably. You could play Ceruledge EX. Then there's also Zoroark EX. You have like a stage 1 with a draw ability. It's different, but there's some similarities there. And then I have Ionos. So Ionos actually, there's some pretty interesting stuff here. The City League tournaments, if you don't know, they're in Japan's format. Japan actually already has the next set after what's essentially joining together. They have some like Ethan stuff, which is being played with Gholdengo, but you could play it with Laventia. Stadium that gets back lightning energy is pretty good within Gholdengo, and you could pair it with it's really good in Ionos as well. The Ionos deck they both play at, you're like kind of cycling around energy. That's the similarity there, just tossing it all around, which is fun. It's a fun part of Gholdengo. But yeah, probably just play Gholdengo, to be honest. It's very good, not really losing much that I think is particularly important. So Gholdengo, still very good post rotation, better than it is now relative to the meta. Same thing with Archaludon EX. Archaludon EX, I actually don't have great recommendations for. I have Ceruledge, which I mentioned is kind of similar, but probably play Archaludon EX still. You have a few different builds. There's some with poison stuff, which is cool. There's some with Hops Double. Some Hops are Hops Zacian EX. Apparently people are playing, what's this? Oh, this is with poison as well. There are different ways to play Archaludon EX. You're losing Origin Form Dialga V-Star, so that's like kind of big, I guess. But Archaludon really is the heart of that deck, and just play it. And there's no like replacement for Origin Form Dialga V-Star either. That's like particularly close. I guess Hops Zacian EX is the closest as a strong attacker, but you're not taking extra turns with anything as far as I can think of. So yeah, still very good post rotation, probably a little better. On this list here, it's ranked as 9, the 9th best deck in the game. I'd say it's somewhere around like 6 post rotation. You could put it higher. I would not follow you for that. Then we have Klawf. Klawf is unfortunately losing double turbo energy. It's also losing Forest Seal Stone and a few cards that are kind of important, but double turbo energy is really important because you can't really attack with it. So you can't really play Klawf like at all post rotation. I would highly recommend against it. You can play Terror Box. I think Terror Box will have a similar feel. Actually, I've not really messed with Terror Box yet. I've done a tiny bit of stuff with it, pre-rotation and post-rotation. The post-rotation stuff, yeah, I've done some stuff with it, but not quite as much as I would have liked to at this point. But I think there's a pretty similar feel. I was a big fan of the Cloth Trapagos deck, I'm really excited for the Terror Box deck and playing it. It's been really fun. It has similarities. Then you can also play really any deck with Pekarunt. We were just looking at Archaludon, Pekarunt, the single prize Pekarunt, which, by the way, this card's like a promo exclusive if you don't know where this card came from. But yeah, mostly in Archaludon. It can be played in other stuff. Um, these Trapagos decks, I assume, are pre-rotation. Yeah, they are. So maybe like Archaludon, but it could be like we see it with a Roaring Moon EX deck. Again, Roaring Moon EX is like kind of weird because you're losing Dark Patch, which we'll actually talk about. I think maybe not actually. But anyways, Roaring Moon is kind of like Miraidon, if you're wondering about that one. But Cloth, there is poison stuff, and it is somewhat similar. Then you have Flareon. Flareon's kind of like a Terror Box deck. I mean, it is a Terror Box deck. Terror Box is like basic Terror Box, Teal Ogre Pond EX, some things like that. Liz Clefairy EX, and you can look at that deck. There's a bunch of stuff about that. It's a pretty cool new deck, but Flareon is also fine enough. It's a little weaker, I'd say, but it's fine. I wouldn't super highly recommend it, but I could definitely see someone enjoying it as well. If you want to play different decks and you really like the Cloth deck, then definitely try it out. And those are the Terra-based box decks, the Terra box and the Flareon deck. They're both Knocked Owl engine decks as well, so do keep that in mind. There isn't obviously anything using Oranguru V as an engine or anything like that. Then the last recommendation here is for Alligator. For Alligator is kind of weird. It's a single prize deck, right? So Cloth's a single prize attacker. It's one of the better single prize attackers in the game right now. And there's two single prize decks. Really, there's Slowking and there's for Alligator. It's not really anything like Slowking like at all. It's not that similar to Alligator, but you have some like disruptive options kinda and some weird damage stuff. So I have those as the most similar. Then the next deck it's Regidrago. We need to talk about Regidrago. This is probably the big one because and it's apparently ranked as number 11 here on Limitless, but it's like really good. And really highly played as well. This is one of the most played decks I see on the ladder. I mean, it's good and it's nothing crazy. It's relatively straightforward. So obviously you can play this. It's rotating, but the top comparison here I have is Ed's Zoroark EX. And Zoroark EX has an ability. I talked about its ability. It's a draw ability, and it has an attack that copies Pokemon. That's kind of like Regidrago V-Star. You have a draw ability, though obviously it's once per game. Regidrago is stronger, but it's very different. But still a draw ability on your main attacker. You have the same HP. You have some different attacking options, one which is a spread option. And so you have some different ones there. Definitely a bit of a weaker deck than Regidrago, but it's still like a fine comparison. And then you also have the Slowking deck. The Slowking deck's also a pretty good comparison. Xatu is kind of like Teal Master Pontiacs. I will say Slowking. Someone was talking about it. There's some different, like I've seen some stuff about it. What set was this? It was here. What's this Slowking? Okay, not that one. I wasn't sure if it was reprinted, but anyway, Slowking, copying attacks again, it's more awkward. Most of us are playing it with Xatu. You could play with other stuff. This card, cool deck, not out yet, so don't play that because you can't. But you can do Slowking with Xatu. That's the main way I've seen. I have heard it mentioned with Teal Master Pontiacs by a few places, but like not really seriously. I would not recommend that. Yeah, but it's solid. It's not great. I actually made a video playing it. It has again serious consistency issues. But you have Kyurem, right? You have Kyurem as a really substantial attacker, and you have some strong one-shotty attackers as well. So the upside is more similar to Regidrago V-Star, but then you have substantial downside. So this deck I definitely say is like not super strong. I'd say it's worse than the Zoroark EX. Not drastically worse, but a little bit worse. Then I have two other comparisons. I have Flareon. Flareon is a stage 1, right? So Regidrago V-Star, not a stage 1. Is a V-Star, that's the stage, but essentially that's a stage 1. So there was some similarity there. outside of that, there aren't great comparisons. Stage ones aren't very good post rotation. There's some okay ones. There's Archaludon EX as well. Maybe that would be actually no, they're fine. You got Goldengo, you got Cerealage, you got Archaludon. Yeah, maybe Archaludon's a slightly better comparison as well, and that's the other one I have. So one of those two. I mean, you could try different things. If you're looking for a close match against the Enzoric EX or Slowking, they're both pretty close matches in playstyle and literally the things that you're doing. Xatu is kind of really similar to Teal'c EX, except it's a more explosive card, but it's a stage 1. And then and also if you could play Raging Bolt EX as well if you really want to use Teal'c EX or Terra Box, but I don't think they're that similar personally. I definitely would recommend one of those top two or a stage 1 deck if you're looking for something that's good and stable-ish. The Enzoric EX is moderately stable, but it's not super high upside, and Slowking's not stable and consistent. So Archaludon is that stable, high HP, decently tanky Pokemon, and you do have some options as well. But yeah, it's rotating, but definitely not a card that I think is going to leave a really big hole in the metagame either. Then we have Lost Zone. Lost Zone, I just have one recommendation for this deck. Lost Zone isn't something I really see much now. It's a pretty cool deck, but I have the Terra Box deck. It could also toss in Flareon, but I'd 100% recommend the Terra Box Noctowl Basic Box deck way more than Flareon. Flareon is similar-ish, but again, you're using evolution attackers. I guess if you're playing Giratina Lost Zone, maybe that. I don't really know, but I don't really see that ever. But with Lost Zone, you have a bunch of different basic Pokemon to attack with. Some of those are the same as with the Terra Box. A lot are different. And then you have the energy acceleration options, which are kind of like Mirage Gate. It's a little different, but it's not completely far off either. Comfey is definitely a or Lost Zone, you have the Comfey Engine, you have Close Experiment, and obviously the Lost Zone itself, nothing is really like that, but yeah, I mean, Comfey and Close Experiment, Comfey, there are cards that have abilities in the active, but they're not really like it. There's Tatsugiri or something, but overall, yeah, definitely Terra Box. It's a deck, I'm really excited for that one. I liked Lost Zone, except Terra Box is a little more consistent, which is cool. Then we have everyone's favorite deck. No, it's Snorlax, though. There's 3 solid comparisons. They're kind of weird, but you have the Milotic Wall Stall deck. Milotic EX is a stage 1. Oh, this is another stage 1. I forgot about it. It's different. But Milotic, you have it's a walling option, and you have Mimikyu potentially in that deck. You have, of course, the Mesogorpon. There's some different things, right? There's Frigiraffe EX is the second one behind Milotic EX. But anyways, you just kind of leave it in the active. Also, if you're playing Iron Thorns, pretty much the same recommendations here. The idea, obviously, you just leave it in the active. Pretty simple, straightforward. A lot of the stuff is pretty similar. It actually plays more similarly to Iron Thorns EX than Snorlax, but it's certainly close enough. Pretty simple, straightforward. If you want to trap your Pokemon, though, your opponent's Pokemon in the active, there are 2 options. Well, Mesogorpon EX is not rotating, but it is losing double turbo energy. So the better options are either Feraligatr or a Froslass box deck. Froslass box is super wide open. There's stuff with Hops, there's stuff with Bidoof, but then there's stuff with Maractus, which is what I'm focusing on. There's also a Spathra EX, but Maractus is a Pokemon that traps, that's coming in Journey Together, but the Totodile that obviously evolves into Feraligatr also traps. It's actually better. It does less damage, which is better. So Snorlax, you don't have an exact replacement, which I'm certainly quite thankful for. But Snorlax is, there are some decks that if you play this deck, if you look for something that's kind of similar in playstyle, you have either those trapping decks, just like Snorlax, although they're a little more similar to Mawile, you're attacking, but, you're trapping. And then you have Wallstall, which is the deck I'd recommend most, which is fine. It's, probably a similar caliber of deck. Snorlax is pretty good, but it's weird, underrated, and also kind of overrated at the same time. But anyways, the next deck is Pidgeot Control. Similar ideas here. I would actually have the same 3 decks. Froslass box is the third one. Milotic is the second one. Some of the Milotic Pokemon are actually played somewhat commonly in Pidgeot EX. Not all the time, but sometimes you got like Melodic EX here, and so there are similarities there, but gameplay wise, like just the style of play, it's different. But then the deck that I think is the most similar is for Alligator. For Alligator, you have different attacking options. You're kind of working with what you got, and Pidgeot EX isn't necessarily attacking options, but different like trainers and sometimes attackers and things like that. And you have trapping with your attack, and you also have theoretical big damage, which you can also see with Blood Mercilina EX. And then the next deck is Roaring Moon, Ancient Box, whatever. This is a single prize deck. I have the two single prize decks as recommendations in Slowking and Feraligatr. They're really different. I'm going to be completely honest. You could also play Ancient Box still if you want to, but I haven't really seen it played post rotation much at all. So I wouldn't really highly recommend that, but if you the one, you could. But yeah, one of those single prize decks, because a lot of people are like, oh, I'd play Roaring Moon because I don't want to play a single prizer, then play one of those. I'd recommend Slowking over Feraligatr, I guess. But they're very different games, like gameplay and play styles from each other and from Roaring Moon or Ancient Box. And then you also have Ceruledge for discarding a bunch of stuff. That's fine. You could toss and Gholdengo, but I'd definitely say much more closer to Ceruledge there. And then lastly, we have Origin Form Palkia V-Star. We have our Caledon EX is the most similar. I don't really see this one played too much, to be honest. We didn't write this down, but something with Lilius Clefairy EX, like a basic box deck, Terra box, or like Flareon, you have a similar attack. Ceruledge EX, your stage 1, and Zoroark EX, your stage 1. And these are like somewhat low to the ground stage 1s, where you're not doing too much. So Palkia is kind of similar to those. Again, I don't see it too much. If you play it in like Ceruledge or Gholdengo, just play this without Palkia. But if you're playing it with like Noctowl or Dusknoir, consider those different decks, including Flareon. But overall, there are a lot of different decks to play post rotation. Tell me down below what you play now, and if it's again something I didn't talk about, I could give you what I'd play in that situation. But I hope you enjoyed. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all that good stuff. And as Osmond said, see you in the next video.